A little bit starstruck myself right now. I get the opportunity to introduce Mr. Scott Grove. He actually authored a textbook that I used when I was a college professor, and so now I get to shake his hand. And what my biggest takeaway from it was his passion for the industry and for his art of veneering, but to take the time to author a textbook speaks about the passion and time that goes into such thing. And so he's here to speak with us about that today. So please help me welcome to the stage Mr. Scott Grove.
All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate it coming. Hopefully your feet are, you can go, the only reason you're here is because you want to get off your feet. I get it, but that's why I should sit too, you know, like a stoned out, you know, old rocker. Go Detroit, how's it going? Anyhow, so I would like to share with you my story and how I've incorporated my personal passion and sort of beliefs into my work. I truly believe that we only go, well, maybe not once in this lifetime, but at least on this world here. And besides making pretty things, it'd be good to incorporate part of your soul into your work. And I didn't even realize this until I got halfway through my career. I've been a third-generation artist, and I became a professional artist at the age of 16. I'm happy to say I raised a family, and I was the sole income. It's not easy, so if you want to be a woodworker, you know, maybe you want to rethink that. In any event, let's just go right into it here. So let's, I'm supposed to change, I'm supposed to do this, right? Does that work? There we go. So I live in Western New York in the Finger Lakes. On a 10-acre lot, we have a sculpture garden, and yes, that is a 16-foot chair that I did for Bausch & Lomb a long time ago, and now I own it. It's my property and my shop. And besides doing veneering and commission furniture, I also do public sculpture and write and teach, most notably at the Mark Adams School of Woodworking, and I head up the Chippendale School of Furniture veneer program in Scotland. And then I do gigs like this, so thank you, AWFS, for inviting me. Really appreciate this. I love sharing my passion. Here's some other pieces here. That's a 14-foot dream catcher, and I'm a Beatles fan. And key to my heart. So this is a little toy there. So, and if you saw me do a handstand, my wife and I do handstands around the world. And if you follow us, people ask us. And that was, I told the story about the Palace in London, and I made the guy look. You know, and he's not supposed to look, and everybody makes faces. Come on, make a smile. And my wife, Nancy, went up to him and said, I'm going to do a handstand. And he's like, what? So anyhow, so we have fun. And there's my beautiful wife, Nancy, and marquetry. And we knew each other in high school in gymnastics class. I was her gymnastics coach. But she just said, I want to be friends. So I got the heart stab. I was like, really? And that's her when she modeled for me at 14 years old. And it took me 30 years to finally reconnect with her, and we reconnected, and now we do handstands. Anyway, let's go back to some of my early work. So some of my earlier work, this is a 1-foot square cube with 2,000 nails nailed into it, and the point here is that my thing is sort of inner beauty and structure. It's sort of discovering inner beauty. I'm going to kind of let the cat out of the bag here. But at the time, I didn't know that. So I encourage everybody to sort of go back to your early childhood and think about what you're into. Because I believe that that was when you were unadulterated. You were not influenced by anything. You were pure in your artistic expression. You weren't even thinking about it. You were just doodling and playing with colors and what have you. And as you go through your career, and if you're trying to be an artist or woodworker, you're trying to find your voice, and you get influenced by other people, and that may or may not be a good thing. So if you go back, you might find what you're really about. So this is an early sculpture, and we're just going to fire through some of the earlier work. I also, in high school, wanted to be a photographer, so some of my photographs are here. I am breaking the boundary, which you can see how the cloud, I do like to break the rules a lot, and contrasting the human form with texture and what have you. So these are some very, very early shots of that. That's actually my wife, and patterns, and we're just going to blow through this. I then spent 2 summers in a backpacking through Europe, which is very influential. I do believe your environment influences you, and you pick up inspiration. And one thing, I'm not a religious person. I consider myself a spiritual person, but I don't, follow any one train of thought there. But I realized that when I saw this is a Cologne cathedral, that people would spend a lifetime or generations creating this art right? And that suddenly really, that impacted me, that how people, their faith could influence what they're creating without even seeing the finished product. I mean, it's real dedication. I realized, oh, if I want to be serious about being an artist, you got to dedicate your life to it. I mean, it was a big impact on me. I also spent a couple years living in the Catskill Mountains, building a log cabin, living off the land, and you'll see some of those early influences in my work also. But primarily, I was a sculptor. So this is a sculpture that during college, I think, and you can see the influence of sort of scaffolding from Europe, and of these cathedrals. Here is a pyramid that I made. And I made a lot of sculptures along the way like this, but I never didn't have much success selling them, right? And that was really, really difficult, trying to make a living as a sculptor. And these are not going. And there we go. Oh, we lost the last one. Oh well, so much for the big surprise. So when I went to RIT, they had a photography program, but they also had a sculpture program, so I minored in sculpture. I have a design degree, and I wanted to learn blacksmithing, and I wanted to learn the human anatomy, the structure. So I spent an entire year forging the human bone, or the human skeleton bone by bone. And when I was done, I didn't know what to do with it. I just had sort of this Frankenstein thing hanging on the wall, and at that point I asked myself, what is the most common gesture throughout history that people use? So I reflected back on historic, and it was the crucifixion. I had a close-up just of the skull, and I always ask the crowd what. No one ever gets it. It took me 3 weeks to sort of answer that question, but it went into a big honor show, and that show then got shut down. So somebody was really offended by this, and they closed the show. And I was like, wait, why? And it's, Jesus Christ didn't have bones. He was, stuffed in the cave and, no bones and all that, whatever that's all about. And I'm like, wait, I didn't even say he was, JC, right? I just did it. What about the guy on the left and the right and the 3,000 people before him, But the point here is that I suddenly realized that how you can affect people with your art or whatever. I mean, you can really make an impression, good or bad. Obviously, this woman who was really upset, but that made us like, oh, I can really make some statements here. And I'm not trying to ruffle the feathers, but these couple of events in my life that said, wow, this is the real deal. I was just learning how to forge and blacksmith. So that's pretty much how I went. And these are not working. This is, oh. There it is. There's the detail. Okay, so here's some other sculptures. And again, at this time, I still didn't know about this inner beauty. I was just doing what sort of came natural. And here are these are 1-foot pieces of slate with gold leaf. And the idea is that the outer is falling away, but the inner soul, if you will, stays pure and stays consistent. And this is just what I was doing until I gave where am I supposed to point this thing? Okay. Until I gave a talk, and someone actually noticed this and pointed it out to me. So it was kind of funny. I was halfway through my career, and I didn't know this was an ongoing theme. I was just doing what came naturally. But I was making these sculptures, and again, you can see this inner beauty peeling away the outer surface. And then one day, I put a piece of glass on one of these sculptures, because it's hard to sell sculpture, but if it's functional, suddenly, and I thought I just invented this sliced bread. I was like, oh my God, I just invented art furniture. Now, I didn't know who Wendell Castle was, and we'll get to him in a minute, but this then really sort of launched my career. People could have a reason to buy some sculpture and use it in the middle of the living room, and I could make a living at it. So I started putting glass on a lot of my sculptures, and still working in steel and wood and all different materials. I didn't focus on wood at all. Then one day, I have an architectural reproduction business. We'll get to that in a minute. But I heard this guy, Wendell Castle, had a chopper gun. It's a big sweaty machine that pumps 55-gallon drums of polyester and catalyzes and chops up fiberglass, and that's how they make cars and boats and whatnot. So I heard this guy, supposed to be really famous, but I didn't care. I just wanted his chopper gun. I knocked on his door. He lived 7 miles from me, which I didn't know. He said, sure. While he's getting the key, I went into his personal gallery, and I saw the first piece of veneer in my life. I mean, really, really looked at it. It was curly redwood, very rare. In fact, years later, I actually bought all of it, the rest that remained. But point is, I suddenly had that wow factor, and that was like, whoa, and I had to touch it, and the chatoyance and the shimmering. And I realized at that point I wanted to learn everything I could about veneer. Now, I'm not formally trained because I was a design student, not a fine woodworker. So I taught myself, which may or may not be a good thing, but by teaching yourself something that you might discover new methods and new techniques. You just got to figure it out, and that may or may not be the right way to do things, and maybe it has to do with my mother, and I'm a little rebellious anyhow, but like, if they say you have to do it, I probably wouldn't do it that way anyhow, but just working it out is always a great way. So this is the very first veneer piece I did. It was all hand-cut, inlaid veneer, and it was, again, a table sort of cracking open, and all this internal beauty is spilling out, right? And again, I still didn't know what this was all about. So that's sort of the way I am, and I started working on this line of furniture. So this is what I call a welfare shelf. There's no visible means of support. It floats off the wall, but again, it's like a geode. So the outside is chainsaw carved, which I would copper leaf and coat, and it looks like a geode, and then you sliced it open, and it gets more beautiful. And then when it cracks open again, it becomes even more beautiful. So the deeper you go, the more pure and more beautiful it gets, and there's a concealed drawer that opens up. And this started sort of my first line of furniture, did a whole variety of these pieces, but then I had kids, right? Oh, did I say I was a professional clown for 5 years? I got accepted in the Ringling Brothers, so that's another story. But I declined them due to lack of freedom because they have to do the same show. Like these Cirque du Soleil people, they have to do like 9 shows a week. They can't change the routine, and that wasn't just me, if you couldn't tell. So I realized at that point I had to get real serious about it, and I came up with a first sort of line of contemporary furniture. These pieces are based on a 32mm system, which are those little holes inside your kitchen cabinet. If you know how to lay out those holes, hardware and drawer slides and everything installs very, very quickly. Very efficient way to assemble cabinetry. And if you're in a production shop, because my real job was I had a cabinet shop, and this was sort of things I was doing on the side, you have to be efficient. So this line of furniture could be very flexible. I could mix and match doors and mix and match the finishes. The cases were chip carved, copper coated, and then I started using exotic veneers. It was all pretty basic stuff, and you could order any size and any combination that you wanted, and I could design and estimate it very, very quickly. And at this point, at one point I had 20 employees. I was doing all the major gallery shows. I was in 30 some odd galleries across the country and cranking this stuff out. One year, I think we were making like 350 pieces of custom furniture a year. And these are just examples. And then I started getting into gems. And again, I just love the wow factor. I love things that make you have to touch. In fact, at the shows, I would say, please touch. You know, I don't want art that you can't touch. You know, I mean, I'm always the guy getting kicked out of the museums because I'm touching the stuff. So that was the first line that was pretty successful. I started playing with sort of how they stand and legs. And then I would do crazy work. And this is all real early stuff. But I would also do a lot of commercial work. Developed a number of systems like this table here. They had to do in 9 days. They said, if you can have the job if you can do it in 9 days. Then they didn't tell me how to go on the 24th floor, and we had to bring it up on top of the elevator, but that's a whole other story anyhow. But whenever I did a commercial job, I would try to sell them on the piece on the right. Again, something that was more me, you know, that geode kind of piece. So I'd use the commercial opportunities to give them a deal so I could experiment and try to get some more of my personal expression into it. Other conference tables and corporate work. But again, it just takes you know, some nice veneer. I also on the side do restoration work. So here's a music box that burned up in a fire or something, and then I restored that. Also for the University of Rochester, I manage all their historic furniture and their historic houses. This is, I think, one of the top 100 beautiful interiors. So all the furniture I refinish, the mirror, I would actually take molds off of the corners of the mirrors and recast new elements, splice them in and re-gold leaf the mirrors. So that entire room is pretty much reupholstered everything. So, and I don't advertise, but kitchens, we'll do kitchens. You know, at the time I was doing everything under the sun. So besides my own work, I had to make a living. So I would design in any style. I think as an artist, you really need to be well-rounded. Somebody wants a Bauhaus looking thing, sure, I'll design a Bauhaus. If they want funky, I'll do funky. So these are just examples of those work. Reception desks are good money. A lot of that, but of course, using a lot of veneer. And now we're going to get some of the good stuff. Oh, this was a table, Parsons-style table. He was a raging alcoholic. He was 18 years old, inherited $42 million, and he wanted a table where he could store his scotch in, so that center panel lifts out, and there's stainless steel bins that pop in and out, different sizes. So I don't know if I picture that one or not. anyhow, a variety of, you know, river tables, if you will. I want to get to the good stuff. So I enjoy line and form. And again, these are just kind of all plain Jane contemporary furniture. That's an expanding table. It opens up to a 12-foot table. Now we get to my restoration work. So on the side, as an artist, you know, we have skills, right? And those skills may not necessarily, the skills can be applied elsewhere. So I'm a pretty good carver and a sculptor. So how does that relate to furniture? Well, that's great, but an architect knew my skills and said, look, we got this building and we need some of these finials restored. So the column capital is after we stripped 3/4 inch of paint off, that top right shot, that's what was left. And from photographs, we had to take the elements that were missing, recarve and resculpt these elements, then make molds, and then cast new elements out of fiberglass and restore the entire building. So this has been just a side job, but it turned into a big thing for a while. And I do this sort of on the side, sort of a leaf that fell off the ceiling, so everything that's gray fell off, and you can see the broken piece. I'd have to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So, and you can see there's my beard. Remember I was telling you I had a beard? There it is there. And other projects here, here's a school. Everything that is not brick is fiberglass. We made over 1,200 molds on this particular job and made, I don't even know what the count is on the pieces, and skinned over because the precast concrete was a bad mix. It took them 40 years to settle a lawsuit, and it was all just falling apart. So we epoxy consolidated all the concrete, because you couldn't take those concrete elements out without tearing a building down, and they wanted to save it. So after consolidating that, we then skinned over with all the fiberglass elements. And that was a big job. Here's a job I did last year for a church, working with a company out of Spain, where the one on the top left was what we had to work with, and on the right-hand side is the restoration. They did the altar, but then they subcontracted to me to do all the other architectural millwork. And those finials, initially we were going to recarve and repair, but it turned out they were single logs that the pith split open way too far beyond, and the weight, we couldn't get to the suspension system because they blew insulation in the attic, we couldn't get to them. So we ended up just repairing one, then made a mold, a rotational mold, recast new elements, and gold leafed them all and reinstalled them. So we reduced the weight and did it for a fraction of the original cost. That worked out pretty well. So then when you're doing trade shows, a lot of times nothing like designing around the UPS girth. So people would see large pieces, oh, we really love it, and yeah, but it's too large to ship. You got to consider shipping it, because shipping sometimes can be, 25% of the cost of the piece, right? So I said, well, what's the largest UPS box I can get and ship overnight? And it was a 5-foot by 16 by 16. So I designed a piece to fit in the box first. And then that was a piece, a fiberglass hull, polymer top. The whole thing knocks down, no tools required. I'd make them 10 at a time, and we could ship them the next day. So it shows, people would say they'd like it, and I'd say, have it tomorrow. And we did really well with this. So this is sort of the second line. And this is where you can start seeing, it's the same thing, the geode, so this element has been sliced open, it's been more beautiful, it's being displayed. And that was my second line of furniture. We did a whole variety of pieces on that theme. It also did very well. I am a leg guy, as the crowd laughs. Other sculptural elements, so then I had an architectural restoration business, and then I had this woodworking business, but the two never met. So then I said, wait a second, I could combine these two, and started making sculptural pieces that were wood and fiberglass, and these are just some of the forms. They're lightweight. And then I started getting into public sculpture, making high chairs, and come on, here we go. So public sculptures throughout Rochester. There's a bench. And getting back to my roots of simple forms. And now this one here, you can see there's 3 slabs, and the first slab is very rough and tilted, and then as it goes through the window, and then there's 2 more out in the meditation garden, but the square is consistent, lines up with a laser, so sort of, again, that soul is consistent throughout the pieces, And the idea is that at RIT, as you get more refined as you travel through their system. But these are some of the public sculptures. That was the chair at Bausch & Lomb, which I was able to get back. Packing foam that you get inside of all your stereo equipment and what have you. I was the resident. They had this Greentopia, when the recycle thing was a big thing. So I made 10 public sculptures for the downtown for this big festival. And that was real fun. So if you ever come over to my house, we basically drink and make art. That's pretty much what we do on weekends, always making stuff. Here's a Oh Say Can You CD. It's kind of a historical document, because you look at that and you find like Windows installation, 1.0, so it's really fun. I had to sort through 8,000 CDs just to get the right colors to make that one. Public sculpture with the Fringe Festival. Actually, it rains from inside the umbrella. Then I'm happy to say that a lot of my collectors and clients will just say, make something. And they give me a theme. They'll say, this is about a relationship. So these are 8-foot totem poles, and it's about the negative space. So the two shapes are sort of based on the human form, but it creates, the negative space creates the third form, again, sort of relationship. What's fun about this piece is that they're on very sensitive bearings, and when you come in, and when you come in and you touch it, it spins and changes that negative space. Like, the relationships are constantly changing. So when it stops spinning, you get a new negative space. So you come in like, how you feeling today, honey? Not feeling very well. But I like to tease people. So this is a piece I made, and I submitted it. I used to write for Fine Woodworking, and I threw this out there and was like, oh, how's this made? And people think, well, you steamed it. Well, no, I didn't. You can't steam it. Oh, you segmented it. No, I didn't segment it. And in like an hour, I had all these people guessing. And I then said, well, I'll let you know on Sunday. I posted on a Friday. And I got all these people like, come on, man, you got to tell me. And I'm like, well, dude, people are really having fun with this. They even said, let me think about it. And I got like, this is where I'm starting to get into the social media, and then there's a lot of jerks out there, like, come on, you're an idiot. I'm like, you can't wait till Sunday? And then I told them how I did it, which is I took a mold off of a tree, and I took the mold off of the bark, and I cast it on the inside. And then everybody's like, you're cheating, that's not fair. And I'm like, wait, isn't staining wood cheating? I mean, where's the line? I'm always like trying to find the line and cross it. That's one of my sayings. And yeah, that got a lot of attention. This was in a Huffington Post. That's on our when we had that polar vortex a couple of years ago. So again, I'm just always creating, working coffee pot. I'm not going to go into that. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes. Oh, I got to get to the good stuff. Political statement. That's when the Wall Street, when we had the big 2008 crash. What are the people called in Wall Street? I actually went down there, got that suitcase and pillow from the people who were camping out down on Wall Street. So I do think that you can make statements in the bags. The whole bag thing, the plastic bag. It's not us, but it's our children. That's a mold off of my nephew that I took, a full body mold off my nephew. And again, I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on, but I did this one because this is how I feel, where we're at right now. But my real work is, what I'm doing currently is I like the gems in the trompe l'oeil. So these are all inlaid gems in pieces. It's become a signature piece, and again, it's you peeling back and looking into the soul. It gets more beautiful the further and further you go. These are all series. Now I'm using furniture as a format, but becoming more back to my roots, which is sculpture. So that's a carved trompe l'oeil, single piece of sycamore with the silver and inlaid gems. The whole series of those. And then when I did this piece, I had to develop how to do that curved edge on that table. So I developed a tool called the Ultimate Router Base and written a couple books about it, but this shows how to easily match a curved joinery. I can talk to you all about that later. It was just last month's Woodcraft cover magazine on that for the 4th. And then I did work for Wendell Castle. If you don't know who he is, look him up. His chairs would go for like $250,000, and he's the guy I bought the chopper gun from. 30 years later, he asked me to run his shop, so I was very honored to go and work for him. Pieces in the Smithsonian, and the bottom left is a piece that I own that he gave me. That's a chair, so quality control, I asked one person to have to sand this for 30 days. How'd you like to have that job? And that was my job to make sure it was perfect. I did help him incorporate digital manufacturing. Almost done to the end here. Some of my other work, just hand. Oh man, there's so many. These are some of the commission work that I do now. Entertainment center, but that whole center piece lifts up and as the TV pops out of that. And here's a bed. This whole bed is actually 2 beds. Those legs aren't real legs. It's all on a carriage, and the whole thing pivots open because those are those hospital beds that articulate, and to make them, you have to split the bed open for the fitted sheets. So the whole thing floats open, and it's split right in the middle. And then those spiral pieces are quite complex. It's a tapered compound spiral curve. And let's just get to, so my spiral match, so that, again, I don't book match. I came up with a spiral match. This is my first Veneer Tech Challenge Award. Here's another one, same people wanted to do about a relationship, so that's my spiral match technique. More of those. Now I got into compound veneering, so this is a 3-way symmetrical compound match there, and everything you see is veneered. So I've developed a system how I can compress and stretch veneer. So here's the nude woman on the left. That's 2 pieces of veneer. So I took a mold, I made a fiberglass casting, and I've developed a method where I can stretch and compress veneer to do extreme compound veneering. And now I teach that, and this is some of my students' work. Motorcycle, hand. I always get challenged at Mark Adams. He said do a working light bulb, so I veneered a light bulb, bowling ball, and we do body parts and everything. So I'm talking about that at 1:30, showing everybody how to do that one. This just won Popular Woodworking's Editor's Choice, and again, you can see the inside, it becomes more beautiful. And the ball is a secret door, so you got to take that Pyrex turn ball and know where to put it on the door to open the door up. So it's kind of a secret thing. And that led me into Inlays. So I have another company now that sells inlay material because I really enjoy mother of pearl and shiny things. Squirrel. So I also teach inlay and alternative techniques. And we're almost at the end here. Power shell and opal. So I've just recently started turning, which is a whole nother world in itself, and really enjoying that. And then now with the turning, I'm able to create more sculptures a lot faster, because a lot of commissions that I do are, take 3, 4, 6 months. And the turning, I can make something in a day and really have fun with that. So I think that might be some of the last works that I do, right? Yes? Ooh, did I make it? 1 minute. That's my score. Is that my score? Okay. So all I got to say is thank you. And when you're creating your own work, think about what your passion is. I don't care if it's beer, boating, booty, whatever. If you incorporate that into your work, it does make it more passionate. Time's up. Okay, fine. There you go. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.